When the Deathworlders billed, the silence of the Vega system was absolute, a velvet void broken only by the hum of our inspection craft sensors as we drifted toward the nondescript rock, designated as Station 74 Delta. According to the manifest, this was a routine human mining operation, a backwater outpost tasked with extracting low-grade silicates from an asteroid belt that hadn't seen a serious trade vessel in 3 generations. Our mandate was simple: confirm the resource yield, verify compliance with galactic safety standards, and move on. We did not expect to find the heartbeat of an empire. As our craft maneuvered to dock with the station's outer shell, the atmospheric scanners began to scream. It wasn't the chemical composition of the air that triggered the alarms. It was the sheer, impossible density of the energy readings radiating from behind the station's reinforced bulkheads. My telemetry officer, a high-strung Xylian with eyes that could perceive microfluctuations in electromagnetic fields, leaned forward, his skin turning a pale, panicked violet. "Supreme Inspector," he whispered, his voice trembling as he pointed to the external monitors. "The asteroid isn't a mining operation. It is a shell." The station's exterior, a rusted, jagged hunk of gray rock, began to shift. It didn't rotate like a standard station, it folded. Massive, kilometer-long panels of heat-shielding ceramic retracted in perfect, synchronized silence, revealing the true scale of what lay beneath. It was not a quarry. It was a shipyard. A shipyard of such terrifying magnitude that it defied every law of logistical probability. Suspended in the hollowed-out cavern of the asteroid were 5 hulking silhouettes, each one easily the size of a capital dreadnought. They were not sleek, aesthetic, or designed for the vanity of interstellar travel. They were built like hammers, broad, brutal, and utterly indestructible. They were crafted from dense, metallic glass composites I had only ever seen in theoretical physics textbooks, materials that could withstand the direct impact of a plasma cannon and absorb the kinetic energy as fuel. These were the Titan-class defense platforms. They were ghosts of human ingenuity, built by a race that the rest of the galaxy had dismissed as primitive, short-lived, and inconsequential. "We are entering restricted territory," the pilot announced, his voice tight with fear. "Should I engage the emergency reverse thrusters?" "No," I said, my gaze locked on the central monitor, where a swarm of autonomous repair drones was busy fusing a new layer of reinforced ablative plating to the chest of one of the Titans. "We go in." As our craft drifted into the cavernous bay, the sheer scale of the operation became clear. There were thousands of humans working here, moving with a calm, methodical efficiency that felt unnervingly disciplined. They didn't seem surprised by our arrival. They didn't scramble to hide the Titans or frantically delete their data logs. They just kept working, welding, calibrating, and testing systems that hummed with a power I couldn't even begin to quantify. A man in a simple, oil-stained flight suit approached our landing platform. He was older, his face etched with deep lines of exhaustion and focused intensity, and he carried a tablet that looked like it had been dropped in a furnace and pulled back out. He didn't bow. He didn't offer the standard diplomatic greetings. He just looked at us, his eyes weary but sharp, and gestured to the vast metal behemoth looming above us. "You're early," he said, his voice as rough as gravel, "but I suppose it doesn't matter. You were going to find out eventually." "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the rhythmic thumping of the shipyard's primary fusion drive. "What is this place?" The man tapped his tablet, and the Titan above us pulsed with a soft, steady rhythm of bioluminescent lights. "I am the lead engineer for Project Aegis," he said, "and this is not a mining station. This is the insurance policy humanity has been building for the last century." He looked at me, his gaze unflinching. You people look at the stars and see territories, resources, and influence. You build ships to show off your wealth and your power. But humanity, we learn the hard way that when the galaxy comes to call, it doesn't come to negotiate. So we stopped building for the show. We started building for the end. He gestured to the Titan. The Aegis platforms are designed for one purpose: to endure. They cannot be cracked, they cannot be hacked, and they definitely cannot be ignored. I looked up at the Titan, the massive metal god of war suspended in the dark. It was a terrifying, beautiful masterpiece of survival, built by a race that had spent its entire history on the brink of extinction and had decided, once and for all, that they were done being the victims. "You are building these to fight?" I asked. "No," he said, turning back to his work. "We are building these so we never have to fight again. Because the only thing that keeps the galaxy quiet is knowing that the people who build for the end are finally awake." I stood there in the silence of the shipyard, the weight of his words pressing down on me. The Deathworlders hadn't been hiding. They had been working. And now, the galaxy would have to decide whether it wanted to be an ally, or whether it wanted to see exactly what those Titans were capable of doing when they were finally allowed to move. It is a simple truth, I realized then. When you ignore the ones who build from the ground up, you do not get to complain when they finally decide to change the sky. The engineer turned away, returning to his work, his figure disappearing into the maze of wires and metal. I looked at the station, the asteroids, and the Titans, and for the first time in my life, I felt the cold, sharp shiver of true, existential dread. The inspection was over. We didn't need to report the yield. We didn't need to check for compliance. We just needed to get back to our command and tell them the truth. The human era of being ignored had ended, and if we were lucky, they would never have to turn those Titans on. I walked back to my ship, the metal floor beneath my feet feeling thin and fragile, like the surface of a bubble waiting to be burst. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see what they were doing next. I just wanted to get home. We accelerated away from Station 74 Delta, the distance between us and the shipyard growing with every pulse of our engines. As I watched the station shrink into the distance, I saw one of the Titans glow, its internal systems finally coming online, a silent, steady beacon in the dark. It was a warning, a simple, mechanical reminder that some things, once built, can never be taken apart. I closed my eyes and sat in the quiet of the ship, thinking about the engineer and his insurance policy. He was right. We had spent so long looking for empires to conquer that we had forgotten that the most dangerous thing in the galaxy isn't a crown or a fleet or a flag. It is a person who has decided that they are tired of being afraid. The lesson was learned. The shipyard was revealed. And from this day forward, the galaxy would look at the human systems and the mining outposts and the quiet, empty asteroid belts with a new, lingering fear. We had found the Deathworlders, and we had discovered that, while we were busy counting our coins, they were busy building the end of the world. Now, it is your turn to tell the story of the galaxy's reaction. Go and look at the stars and see if you can hear the rhythm of the Titans. The quiet is over. The journey back to the outer command cluster felt infinitely longer than the arrival. My flight crew remained dead silent, the Xylian telemetry officer staring blankly at his console, where the encrypted data packets from Station 74 Delta sat locked behind a digital wall we dared not touch. We had entered that sector as arrogant arbiters of an empire. We returned as couriers of an apocalypse we were entirely unprepared to explain. When our inspection vessel finally docked within the primary hub of Sector 9, High Command was waiting. Supreme Chancellor Vral did not greet us in the grand starlight amphitheater or the polished marble halls of the administrative citadel. He summoned us to the subterranean vault, a cold, secure chamber lined with emergency comm nodes and emergency planetary shielding status boards. He was a veteran of the expansion wars, a towering figure of hard scales and cold authority, and his multifaceted eyes fixed upon me the moment the airlock hissed open. "Report," Vral commanded, his voice echoing off the bare metal walls. "Your transmission was truncated. Your telemetry logs are incomplete. Did you find irregularities in the silicate extraction quotas, or is this bureaucratic incompetence?" I stepped forward, my boots clicking sharply against the grating. I placed my data slate on the central table, though I knew the physical slate mattered very little compared to what was burned into my memory. "It was not incompetence, Chancellor," I replied, my voice steady despite the lingering chill in my blood. "There is no mining station at 7-4 Delta." Vral's crest flared in mild irritation. "Explain." "It is a foundry," I said. "A shipyard, built inside the husk of an asteroid 50 times larger than standard survey projections indicated. They are constructing capital-class defense platforms, hull thickness and energy densities that defy every conventional model of kinetic physics. They call them Aegis platforms, and they are not alone." The chamber fell into a profound, suffocating stillness. A junior logistics officer near the back of the room let out a sharp, nervous intake of breath. "Shipyards," Vral stepped forward, leaning over the table, his claws resting on the cold surface. "The human outer colonies were disarmed following the Orion Accord. They have no industrial capacity for capital construction. Our automated long-range sensors would have detected the thermal exhaust of heavy manufacturing cores years ago." "They built them underground," I answered bluntly, "beneath 50 miles of silicate and rock, utilizing the planetoid's internal geothermal vents for power. They didn't use hyperspace dockyards that broadcast energy signatures across the grid. They built them in absolute silence, using closed-loop manufacturing systems that leave no thermal wake in the vacuum. They didn't break the rules of the Accord, Chancellor. They simply ignored the grid entirely and built their own foundation from the ground up." Vral stood upright, his expression shifting from skepticism to a cold, calculation-driven assessment. "How many?" "5 in the initial drydock bay," I said, "and our subsurface acoustic probes suggested massive subterranean excavation activity extending across 3 neighboring star systems. They are not just building a fleet, they are fortifying an entire sector into an impenetrable bastion." The Chancellor turned away, pacing slowly toward the reinforced observation port that overlooked the bustling capital space lanes outside. Thousands of sleek, silver Imperial cruisers drifted through the cosmic lanes like jeweled needles, elegant and proud, broadcasting their power to the entire galaxy. They were symbols of total dominance, crafted for speed, intimidation, and orbital supremacy. And yet, watching them now, I felt only a hollow, fragile weight in my chest. "They think they can hide behind rocks," Vral muttered, his tone hardening with Imperial pride. "If humanity wishes to play at empire building, we will correct their oversight. I will dispatch the 3rd Imperial Fleet. We will quarantine the Vega system, seize their little engines, and remind them who writes the laws of this galaxy." "Do not do that," I whispered. Vral stopped pacing. He turned back, his eyes narrowing to sharp slits. "Repeat that." "If you send a fleet," I said, looking him dead in the eye, "you will not be starting a war. You will be walking into a closed room with a creature holding a detonator. I saw the lead engineer, Chancellor. I saw the way they look at our ships. They are not afraid of our cruisers. They built those Titans precisely because they expected us to come with fleets. They aren't trying to conquer the galaxy. They have simply decided that they will no longer allow the galaxy to dictate whether they survive." The silence in the chamber stretched thin, threatening to snap. Every officer in the room held their breath, waiting to see if the Chancellor's pride would override his reason, waiting to see if the ancient machine of imperial expansion would grind forward into catastrophe. Vral stared at me for a long, agonizing moment. Then, slowly, he straightened his ceremonial sash, his scales flattening as a deep, reluctant realization settled over his features. A society that builds for the end does not negotiate terms, he murmured, more to himself than to the room. They only wait for you to make the first mistake. He turned back to the viewport, watching the glittering, arrogant ships drift past in the void. Cancel the quarantine orders, Vral commanded, his voice dropping into a somber, definitive register. Issue a permanent navigational avoidance vector around the Vega system. Mark it as sovereign territory, and notify the High Council that human space is officially closed to inspection. I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. The crisis had been averted, not by strength of arms or political posturing, but by the simple, terrifying deterrence of a species that had looked into the dark and decided to forge their own armor. Across the galaxy, the stars continued to burn with their ancient, indifferent light. But somewhere out in the deep silicate belts, behind walls of smart titanium and basalt, the Titans waited in the dark, a silent, unyielding reminder that when the universe gets too loud, the ones who build from the ground up will always hold the final rhythm. The navigation advisory broadcasted across the galactic network within the hour. A quiet, unprecedented directive that sent ripples of disbelief through every trade guild, Senate chamber, and military academy from the core worlds to the rim. Sovereign territory, unapproachable, off-limits. For an empire that had spent 10 millennia rewriting maps and swallowing star systems whole, the concept of a self-imposed exclusion zone was an insult, a bitter pill coated in the metallic taste of caution. Yet, High Command knew the alternative. When you stare into an abyss, and the abyss looks back with the cold, measured patience of a titanium foundry, you learn to step away from the edge. Across the sprawling bureaucratic corridors of the central administration, the reaction was not panic, but a slow, churning realization. The old paradigm of galactic dominance, where power was measured by the number of polished cruisers in a victory parade, was dead. Humanity had quietly rewritten the equation. They had proven that true strength does not roar in the vacuum, it waits in the dark, anchored to the mantle of a forgotten rock, forging the kind of permanence that no amount of plasma fire could ever unseat. Back in the Vega system, 50 miles beneath the silent silicate crust of Station 74 Delta, the lights in the primary drydock bay hummed with a steady, low-frequency resonance. The maintenance drones continued their methodical sweep across the hull of the central Titan, fusing microscopic layers of smart ceramic armor into place with arcs of brilliant blue light. There were no celebrations. There were no triumphant speeches broadcast across the stellar lanes. The engineers and mechanics simply went about their work, their movements efficient, practiced, and utterly devoid of arrogance. In the observation gallery, overlooking the cavernous bay, Colonel Elena Vance leaned against the reinforced quartz railing, watching the massive silhouette of the defense platform loom in the dim light. Her grandfather, Marcus, stepped up beside her, the familiar click of his boots echoing softly against the metal flooring. He held a scarred metal flask in one hand, the faint scent of old coffee drifting between them. They cleared the sector, Elena said quietly, her eyes reflecting the pale glow of the diagnostic screens. The last of the Imperial reconnaissance probes jumped out 10 minutes ago. Marcus took a slow sip from his flask, his expression as weathered and immovable as the rock walls surrounding them. "Let them run," he muttered, his voice a gravelly rumble. "Running gives them time to think, and thinking is the first step toward wisdom." "Do you think they will ever come back?" Elena asked, glancing sideways at him, not as scouts or inspection teams, but truly. Marcus looked up at the vast, towering shoulder of the Titan above them, a mountain of human ingenuity forged from the crushing pressure of the deep. Maybe, he said, but if they do, they will not come with threats. They will come because they have finally realized something fundamental about the universe. You can conquer a world with a fleet, Elena, but you can only survive in one if you know how to build from the ground up. He tapped the metal railing with his knuckles, a sharp, rhythmic double beat that resonated through the deck plates, blending seamlessly with the eternal, low hum of the station's geothermal core. He turned away from the viewport, walking slowly back toward the primary command access way, his shoulders slightly stooped with age, yet carrying the unmistakable weight of a man who had stared down an empire and left it wondering. "Come along, Colonel," Marcus called back over his shoulder. "We have more hulls to reinforce. The galaxy is a very large, very noisy place, and our work here has only just begun." Elena smiled, a small, fierce expression that caught the emerald glow of the tactical grid and pushed off the railing to follow him. The silence of the deep closed in around them, warm, secure, and unbreakable. The Titans waited in the dark, silent sentinels of a new era, proving to anyone who cared to listen that when a species refuses to break, the stars themselves learn to keep the peace. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more incredible stories. Hit the bell icon to stay updated on our latest uploads.